5 years ago, something happened in Hollywood that never does. A movie that was not supposed to exist suddenly did. Zack Snyder's Justice League wasn't just another superhero film. It was the result of years of fan campaigning, corporate necessity, and a streaming platform desperate for marquee content. When the film came out in March of 2021, it marked not only a victory for the fans, but a very strategic move by Warner Brothers. 5 years later, the question is simple. How does the film hold up? The release of Zack Snyder's Justice League was undeniably a win for fans who were campaigning for years under the hashtag release the Snyder Cut, but it was also very much a necessity for Warner Brothers at the time. HBO Max had just launched the same year of its announcement in 2020. The streamer needed exclusive content and subscribers to sign up. Releasing Zack Snyder's Justice League was a perfect headline for just that. So while fans rightfully celebrated the moment, the reality is that the film only exists because, well, both sides needed something from each other. There's no denying that the campaign over the years helped draw this to become something that it wasn't supposed to be. It helped draw the curiosity from the audience that didn't even know there was a Snyder Cut to begin with. Even people who were not fans of the previous films wanted to see what all the fuss was about, so that attention definitely benefited the movie more than not. However, the momentum in that regard kind of came to a halt very quickly after its release. You see, the campaign had a very clear goal: release the movie. And once the goal was achieved, the industry really had very little reason to continue the story. So let's address the obvious here. With a 4-hour runtime, the film is simply too long. There are moments that absolutely didn't need to exist. Side characters like Iris West, or even the singing Icelandic girls, those are the moments that just didn't need to be in there, as they had very little to the core narrative. On top of that, Snyder's overuse and heavy use of slow motion dramatically stretches scenes that would have worked just as well at normal speed. The result is a movie that just feels kind of bloated, even if the intention behind those scenes is clear. With that said, there are real strengths when it comes to this film. Ray Fisher's portrayal of Cyborg is the clearest example of this. In this movie, Cyborg is the emotional center and heart of this film, something that was almost entirely absent from the 2017 film. And it's one of the biggest reasons why the Snyder Cut feels so much more coherent. Even with an extended runtime of 4 hours, the film still seems underdeveloped. The resurrection of Superman feels rushed. The build-up to his return is very minimal, and the confrontation between Superman and Justice League plays out far too quickly. For a character so central to the overall story, his reintroduction just kind of felt thin. Now, of course, people want to compare to the 2017 version, and when you do compare the two, there is no denying that Snyder's version is just better, whether it's thematically or cinematically. Tone is more consistent, the visuals are far more striking, and many of the awkward moments that Joss Whedon added in are completely gone. But the reality is the core story actually largely remains. The difference lies with the execution, the tone, and the presentation. Ironically, the 2017 film executed exactly what the studio wanted: a shorter, faster blockbuster. It just failed to deliver at the box office like Warner Brothers was hoping. But one area that the Snyder Cut absolutely blows 2017 out of the water is the imagery. Zack Snyder has always been a visual filmmaker, and many of the film's moments carry real weight because of this, whether it's through composition, scale, or symbolism. The movie often feels mythological in tone, and that gives the characters a larger-than-life presence. And whether you love or hate the storytelling angle, the visual ambition is undeniable. The introduction of Darkseid is another highlight of the movie. He looks imposing and is visually impressive, but he's used sparingly. That's because the character was meant to be used as the central antagonist for future films. Unfortunately, those plans never materialized. And ultimately, this is where the film runs into its biggest structural issue. Zack Snyder's Justice League functions less of a complete movie and more like the first chapter in a larger story. Snyder intentionally set up future events within this movie because he believed he was going to get to highlight those in follow-up films. But even when the Snyder Cut was greenlit, both Snyder and the studio knew that there would be no more after this. The result is a film that builds to something that never comes. And that reality is what fueled the fan frustration even today. But I have to ask, did this movie actually help the DC brand at all? From a long-term perspective, No, this film did nothing to help the brand. The studio had already decided to move in another direction. The Snyder Cut existed as a one-off project rather than the start of a renewed franchise. It absolutely satisfied a moment in time. It didn't shape the long-term course for DC as a whole. In the early days, the Snyder Cut movement showed how powerful a fandom can be when they focused on positivity. Fans raised tons of money for the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention, all while advocating for Snyder's vision to be released. It was an impressive example of a community rallying behind a filmmaker. But shortly before the film came out, the movement fractured. The more that it became clear that there would be no continuation after the Snyder Cut, the fandom shifted towards hostility, targeting studio executives, boycotting other projects from the studio, and lashing out online. What began as a positive campaign slowly turned into something far more toxic. And from a fan perspective, wanting the Snyderverse to continue is completely understandable. But from a business perspective, it was always very, very unlikely. You see, there was no guarantee that the remaining films would be financially successful. Snyder's arc also had a definitive ending, which sort of ran counter to what the studio wanted in an overarching and larger universe with their DC characters. Studios rarely gamble billions of dollars on projects with uncertain long-term sustainability. But here we are 5 years later, and Zack Snyder's Justice League remains an impressive example of what happens when a filmmaker is allowed to complete his vision with very little interference. It's epic in scale, visually striking, and emotionally resonant in certain moments. But it's also very difficult to watch because of its length. 4 hours is a major time commitment, and the pacing issues become very more visible in repeat viewings. It would be nice if the film would be remembered 15, 20 years down the line, primarily for the dedication of a fan base, specifically a fan base that fought for artistic integrity while raising awareness for suicide prevention. Unfortunately, that legacy has become far more complicated. What began as a remarkable victory has, in some corners of the internet, turned into a case study in fandom entitlement, where some fans believe the studios owe them a continuation, regardless of the business realities. And that, perhaps, is the most bittersweet realization of the Snyder Cut story.